It's November 29th, 2014, and this is the 8th video that I'm making for today regarding government rape. And I said I would get that address of the location where I was raped many times by United States government employees and Department of Justice persons for the lying down position. And it's the residence that the Avilas have stayed in for several decades. And I believe that their landlord and the owner of that property is legally liable for everything that has occurred on his property. And I also do know that I met him when I was a kid, and he was corrupt. He was using his he used leverage against me, against I think the Avilas even, to facilitate higher earnings for himself that looked natural and also were under the table. That address that my son has been held hostage at ever since the United States government rapists thought that they could now kidnap my son is 7580 Smith, Smith Road in Dryden, Dryden, Washington. And the zip code is 98821. That's the physical address. And it's on an orchard. And then there are other orchards, some of them with corrupt individuals as well, that adjoin that orchard. But cops and military regularly patrol that entire area. And it's been a hideaway for a long time for corruption and trafficking of children, including rape and torture and everything else. And the other thing I thought that I would mention, since I tried to explain or preface some of the organized crime that was also occurring to me in England. I haven't really mentioned Canada as much, but they were also involved, is when I brought up the note by Diana, or the note from me to Diana. The information that I got, the individuals that I overheard saying that someone was plotting this against me, came from a man named Paul Castle. And I bring him up because Paul Castle is part of the Wenatchee, Washington area, and he's also part of the trafficking and sex rings of kids in that area. But when I overheard him saying something about Charles and wanting to kill me by brake failure, it was at my house in Moses Lake, Washington, not in Wenatchee. So he had traveled over there, and he was with a group of people, and it was in my parents' bedroom that specific discussion was taking place. And I don't completely remember. I'm sure that it might be clearer for me later, but I'm not sure if possibly someone said something before that, and then he was just repeating it. But I think it's interesting that he was Paul Castle, this lawyer, public defense attorney from Wenatchee, Washington. And then the individual that Diana gave this note to, who revealed it in court, was Paul Burrell. Both of them are Pauls. I don't know when Diana hired Paul Burrell as her butler. I don't know what date it was. But at the time that I heard this information, I was probably around 10 years old. Give or take a couple of years to be on the safe side, but I would say approximately around age 10. So, was he her butler at that time? I'm not sure. I don't remember. I met some of her other servants and that kind of thing. But I was not, but quite often when I was around her, sometimes it was just me and her. It wasn't, she didn't have a bunch of other servants in the room when I was there with her. Maybe I was the servant. But, yeah, there were not even people sort of walking around in her place quietly doing certain tasks while I was typically with her. If I saw servants, it was usually in the larger castle area, like not in her private room, but in the more generalized like hallways or other things like that. She did not, at least around me, she didn't just have like a housekeeper or a butler like waiting around in her room for her all the time. You know, that area, from what I saw, was closed off to anyone unless they knocked on the door. And pretty much she could be in there by herself. So anyway, the government involvement, you know, they've used a lot of people from the Wenatchee area. And it is unfortunately that area and a few other government like hotspots where a large number of individuals had been prepared for the potential for being able to kidnap kids, you know, for the government whenever they want. The Pentagon would torture someone by remote or direct means. Doctors would coordinate to lie, call them drug seeking, or try to give them a bad rap about one thing or the other. And all the social workers were working for military. Most of those social workers in that area are from military families. The lawyers were positioned to work for the state, and the state was doing whatever the federal government told them to do. And the state was getting a lot of money. They were making a lot of money off of willingly trafficking kids and allowing them to be raped and tortured. And while I don't remember a situation where I was inside of an FBI building lying down on the floor with an FBI agent on top of me. I do know that the FBI, I was in at least 3 different FBI offices where they tortured me. And for some reason, torture was not something they had a problem with doing against little kids. They'd put the electrocution head brace on my head and torture me right there in their offices. They also experimented with other forms of torture against me inside of FBI field offices. I don't, at this time and moment, specifically recall being inside of an FBI office and giving a blowjob, or being specifically in an FBI office, having someone lie down on top of me, or that kind of thing. They pretty much had their field agents go out on the field, and then if they committed crimes against kids, they did it outside of, for the most part, they did it outside of their official government offices. But some of the torture against kids and methods of trying to intimidate them and even using death threats against children, that was done inside of FBI offices on a regular basis. And they are not kid-friendly. They are child abusers. I have yet to see the day that they are proving themselves to be what they claim to be. But did I get the offices wrong? You know, am I mistaken about where I really was when they when I say I was tortured by the FBI in their offices. No, I'm not mistaken. You had to go through security, go through a bunch of different FBI agents, and it said FBI right there on their doors, and somewhere around the building before we went in. And they didn't really care that I knew. I think that the FBI figured they were going to bump me off one day, and it wouldn't really matter if I knew them at the time that they were harming me, because I think they thought by age 16 or 17 they were going to have me murdered. They participated in several different kinds of quote-unquote accident schemes and suicide attempt schemes in trying to facilitate the idea that I would kill myself or commit suicide, do them a favor. And then they also helped with organizing ways to have me killed by accidents. And then they also subjected me to several rapists who were outside of the regular circle of government employees, such as serial rapists and murderers. And they also had me trafficked outside of the U.S. and raped, and then they pretend to be the good guys rescuing me from the rapists who are international. And the fact is, they wanted me to get so confused as a kid about, who the good guys were, because they were trying to make it look like, oh, they're the good guys. If I'm in a different country and some other international person's raping me, the United States is protecting me, or they're jumping to my rescue. Well, the whole question goes back to, why was the United States government putting me in that position in the first place? Because they deliberately wanted me to be raped by other individuals, but they didn't want it to look like they were coordinating it. It looks pretty bad for them to be raping kids in their own country, and it looks even worse if they're trafficking kids to other countries so that more people can rape a little girl. So they made it appear as though they were rescuing me, but they put me in harm's way deliberately, and they were making payments. They were giving money to these people who chose to rape me. So they'd rescue me, quote unquote, from a situation. One time, an Asian man was in the middle of raping me, and suddenly jumped out and rescued me from being held hostage by him. And so why are they paying him money? And why did the United States government traffic me over to him in the first place? So the United States government is guilty of raping and torturing little kids. And when it wasn't premeditated ways on how their own agents could rape me in the United States and get away with it, it was sometimes having me go to other countries and having leaders or other kind of government officials from other countries rape me, paying them off, and then using that as a kind of security in the future. I guess they thought, oh, if you ever get a member inside the UN or some kind of international court, we'd really appreciate it if you remember that we paid you to not talk about this, or to return our slave if she ever escapes to your country, that kind of thing.